Why am I here? As important as this question is, it's probably equally important that we define some of our terms here first, because there are different ways to answer that question. You can be, why am I here, or why am I here, or why am I here? And even that last one, which is probably closer to what I'm trying to address, has at least two different ways of looking at it. That is, the question may be, what is my purpose? And the second is, where did I come from? Well, I'm looking more at that first part there. I want to answer the question, what we're for, why we were created. We're not ultimately cosmic accidents that matured out of the cosmic ooze, but we were created by God for a very specific purpose. That purpose is ultimately the worship of the living God, the glorification of the living God. That's what we're for. We're not here for our well-being, whether in the short term here on earth or in the long term into eternity. We're not here for our own purposes and our own agenda. We were made to worship God. God made Adam and Eve, and he put them in the garden, and he was in relationship with them, and he called on them to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it, to exercise dominion over the created order, to reflect God's glory in creation. But it was God's plan from before all time that the fall would in fact happen. I trust, however we might try to answer the profoundly difficult question of how it happened, every believer has to confess that God knew it would happen, and in that sense, at the very least, planned that it would happen. So the plan was that would happen, that God might make known the glory of his wrath, as we're told in Romans chapter 9, verse 5, and that he would show forth the glory of his grace. So God is in the business of making manifest, making visible the glory which is his. And he has made humans just a little lower than the angels. And we have this dual role. One, we are in relationship with him. We can glorify him. We bear his image, so we reflect his glory. But also, because we have fallen into sin, we can either manifest God's glory in his just judgment of our sin, or we can manifest his glory in his rescue of us from our sin. Both of them equally glorious. You know, a lot of folks outside the kingdom, and some even inside the kingdom, wrestle with this idea. Why would God make anybody if he knew they were going to end up in hell? Well, it's because he knew they were going to end up in hell, because God is glorified in the manifestation of his justice. The question, if it really is an objection, is an implicit affirmation that God exists for us rather than the other way around. Now, some might say, well, now, wait a minute. If God made us to glorify him, and God calls us not to glorify ourselves, then doesn't that make God a hypocrite? Well, it would make God a hypocrite if the reason God calls us not to glorify ourselves is because there is some sort of universal, objective, transcendent moral standard which includes this command. No being should pursue its own glory. But there is no such law. The reason God commands that we not pursue our own glory is not because no being should pursue its own glory, but because all beings should pursue his glory, including him. We exist for the manifestation of his glory. The universe exists for the manifestation of his glory. He exists from before all time. But his goal, his end, or his purpose is exactly the same: to manifest his glory. Which means, friends, the more fully we enter into worship, which of course requires that we be at peace with God, which requires the atonement of Christ for us and our repentance, but the more we enter into the worship of God, the more we enter into what we were made to be, and if we are believers, precisely what we will do for eternity. The more we worship, the more heavenly our experience already becomes.